Hey guys, first let me just say that I'm sorry to see Mr. Inko go. I'm sure you guys are as well. He was a really cool guy. Um, but we lost an AP US history teacher downstairs, so he's having to go fill in down there. And so I'm going to start recording my presentations, and hopefully this will work out. Um, we'll see how it goes. We'll give it about a week, and then I'll get some feedback, and we'll see how it goes. All right. So let's review because y'all just took a test and you took a test over the societies around the Silk Road. So you learned about the Muslims that were living in this area, and you learned about the Mongols who created this massive empire all over through this area. And they were led by Genghis Khan, if you remember, and he had four sons, and they each got a kingdom. And the one of the sons, his name was Kublai Khan. He actually got the kingdom here, the Khanate in China, and this is the one that Marco Polo was actually meeting with when he went back and forth. Marco Polo, he was gone for over 20 years and living in the court of Kublai Khan. Um, that's why we have that game, Marco Polo, where people are like, I can't find you because, and you play this in the pool, like you close your eyes and you're looking for Marco Polo, because the premise behind that game was nobody knew what happened to him. He was gone for so long. He went to go trade with the East, and then he never came back. Well, he did come back, but it took forever. Anyways, so got sidetracked. um, Back to where we are. So we were looking at trade along the Silk Road, and then I had you guys go to the Crusades. So, in particular Europe, where the Black Death was happening. Uh, this is actually a map of the movement of the Black Plague. If you remember from the documentary, the plague was really brought by road. It wasn't brought by ship. I mean, it does come by ship, but initially it's going to come by road and by the Silk Road. Um, he it's gonna enter, and it's actually gonna come in waves. Like it doesn't happen all. It happens more than once. So it doesn't. This is not something that happens overnight. Like right now, you see the coronavirus in the news. This isn't like something that would have happened, and 2 months later, half the population is gone. No, this took years. But after 1351, you've got 1/3 of the population of Europe just gone, decimated. And this is going to really change the structure of how Europe is ruled. Um, if you think about it, can you imagine if you were living in the United States? Let's pretend a crazy virus, something worse than Ebola, gets to the United States shores, and within 3 years 30% of our population is gone. That means 1 in 3 people. That would devastate our economy, our society. There wouldn't be people to do certain jobs. There wouldn't I mean, everything would come to a standstill. It would make things very, very difficult. Um, we would probably have a collapse of government. Um, and that's what happened in Europe. I mean, 1/3 of the population was decimated. So it was a mess. And it's going to take a long time to come back. Now, when the leadership falls, remember when the Roman Empire fell, there was this lack of leadership. And people didn't really travel much. They stayed in near their homes, and that's how feudalistic societies grew, because it was dangerous to travel. Well, after the Black Plague, I mean, you have this lack of leadership, so there's going to have to be a whole restructuring of who's going to take power. And the group that ends up taking power is the church, the Catholic Church. They are going to rule this area for a very long time. Now, there will be kings. However, the church is going to have more power than anybody else in Europe at the time. Now, that's where the Crusades come in. You know, a lot of people, they they wanted to expand the power of the church, monetarily and with numbers. They wanted to have more followers and they wanted to gain more money. So they send these knights out. Um, to go conquer and take back the Holy Lands from the infidels, as they called them. The Pope gave them a free pass. He forgave them their sins and told them, I the word is, I give you absolution from any sort of fault if you kill anybody other than a Christian. This was basically a free pass to commit murder, which there's been many wars fought over religious beliefs. It doesn't make it okay, but it happened, and it has happened. So the Crusaders go out and they go to the Holy Land. And remember, there's already a ton of trade going on, right, on the Silk Roads. There's movement from people from China, from India to Persia, to the Arabian Peninsula, and all of this movement of people. It's going to also mean that there's like a movement of ideas and a movement of culture and religion. So the Crusaders are going to bring back a bunch of culture. Basically, they're going to bring back to Europe awareness of what's going on in the other parts of the world. It's kind of like how you guys get on the internet and you can easily search up like what's happening in South Korea, or you're very in tune to their culture because we have access to it. We can just pick up our phones and we can see what's going on in the world. The movement and the travel of people at this time, that's what was giving people access to culture. All right, so that brings us to our new topic, and that is the Renaissance. So we're going to talk about today, like, why did this even start and what was it? If you don't know what Renaissance means, Renaissance literally means new birth. So it's a new age in Europe of enlightenment, of learning, and of acceptance of culture outside of what they had known. I mean, they had been stuck in the Dark Ages for 1,000 years. So this is going to really change their worldview. Now, so from approximately 400s, that's like when the Roman Empire fell, until the 1300s, it's largely feudalistic. People aren't moving. They're staying in their villages because it's the safest way to do it. But there's a lot of focus on religion. And it's not really about individual thought. It's about whole thought. Like, everybody's just like trying to follow what the church says. But then the Crusaders start to go out in the 1100s, and there's a lot of trade going on in the Silk Road around the 1000 to 11 to 1300s. So the movement of people starts bringing new ideas. People start moving into the cities because the markets get bigger because there's a lot more goods to trade. So when people start to come together in urban societies, naturally human beings they start conversing and questioning and asking themselves, so why are our beliefs right when the guy or the people 2,000 miles away in the Arabian Peninsula believe something different? And are they wrong? Are we right? People start to question this. So universities will start to open up. There's universities that are in existence today that were established during this time, in particular like Oxford University, Cambridge University. These universities were there in 1100. So they're definitely like this establishment of new ideas has stayed with us. It's not something that has left us. Okay. Now, when we talk about the Renaissance, what we're really talking about is this focus on humanism. So if you remember, like in Greek culture and in Roman culture, there was really this focus on like the individual. If like look at this statue in the picture, right? So that's Octavius, the first emperor of Rome. They created a statue of somebody that wasn't affiliated with a religion. This was a leader. There was really this focus on like his greatness as an individual. And in Greece, remember, in their mythology, they always they praised their gods were very human like, and they always praised like personal achievements, like Achilles, right? He had amazing strength and nobody could fight him. There was this focus on individualism. Well, then during the Dark Ages and before the Renaissance, the church really takes over, and everything from the way that people studied to what they studied to how they expressed themselves artistically was always religious in nature. Like they always had to, if they were painting a scene from a Bible. If they were reading or becoming scholars, they were studying the Bible. That it was very, very narrow and centered on Christianity. But as merchants are moving around on the Silk Roads, as the Crusaders are moving around, people start to get new ideas. It happens. You want to expand your mind? Travel. See how other people live. And it'll make you question your own ideas. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the Renaissance would not be possible if there were not people that actually invested in allowing people to learn. Like to establish a university or to build it, it takes money. So there has to be a concerted effort to actually build these institutions of learning. And there has to be a concerted effort to get people to create art, because you have to think about it. If you wanted to become an artist, it wouldn't be easy. You would have to be able to sell your art. It's not you unless you had your own money and you came from a wealthy family. You couldn't just say, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to stay home and paint all day, because nobody's going to pay you to do that. If there are for that in order for that to happen, there has to be people that will sponsor you to create your art, and these people are called patrons. Now, the first major patrons during the Renaissance era, this family called the Medicis, and they live in Florence, Italy. Now, Italy had become very wealthy because of the trade on the Silk Roads, because Italy was a crossroad between the East and Europe. So everything was going through Italy. Venice became the wealthiest city in all of Europe, and Florence, which is breathtakingly beautiful, becomes a center for art. And not necessarily because it was the place where people were going back and forth, but because it became a banking empire. Now, and that's how the Medicis make their money. And when they become bankers, they become very, very, very rich. And they're the only ones that can have, well, the people in this area are the ones that have the money to actually support artists to create and to better society. Like they're investing their money in creating a better world. But a little background on the Medicis. I know we think of them as the way I've explained them is that they're patrons of the arts and they're trying to create a better world. But the Medicis were pretty controversial. They made their money in a way that was not acceptable at the time. So according to Christian beliefs of the time, you could not lend money to people and charge interest. It was against church rule. It was against Christian belief. So if you were a Christian and you lend money to another Christian, you were never supposed to charge interest when they got it back. It was considered like profiting off of charity. And charity was an essential part of Christianity. So in Italy, in these areas where there was people moving around and they definitely needed to borrow money or exchange money, the people that did it for them were Jews, because it wasn't against the Jewish tradition to be able to charge interest. So the Jews were the first bankers in this area. Now, this is one of the reasons why the Jews have been persecuted throughout history. They've always been seen as the cause, the financial reasons for everybody's problems, which that's just the scapegoats. It doesn't mean it's true. But the Jews were the first bankers. They would lend out money and they would charge interest when they got it back. and made them very wealthy. There was a whole Jewish neighborhood in Florence where it was the banking center up until for like 400 or 500 years. The Jews were running the banks of Italy. Now, the Christians always saw the Jews as lesser than. They thought they were lower class because they're charging interest, because they're profiting off of something they shouldn't. They always saw them as different because the Jewish people tended to keep their own society. They had their own religion. They kept their own language, and they didn't tend to go outside and acquire other cultures. They were very to themselves. So they were always seen as different and persecuted for it. But the Medici, they got smart, and they said, you know what? The Jews are doing something that makes money, and I want to make money too. So they started to lend out money for interest. And they were looked down upon for a long time. Most of the royal families in Italy did not like them. They thought they were trashy because they were lending out money. They were lending out money and charging interest. And as a Christian, you weren't supposed to do that. So they thought it was like, it was real ghetto, and they didn't like it. So the Medici, they're always fighting to like gain social status. And one way that they do this is they use their enormous wealth, because they're going to make so much money, they're going to be richer than kings, richer than governments. They're going to make so much money. They're going to use their money to support the arts, support universities, so that way they feel like their name will be carried on throughout history. They're going to be known as wealthy and supporters of the arts and respected in that way. It's kind of like how people want to leave their name, build a building and put their name on it. Rich people like to do that, so people remember them. Well, the Medicis, that's exactly what they were doing. And it worked. I mean, we still absolutely remember who the Medici are, and they are with us through history. I don't know how else to say it. Like, we know who they are. Without them, the Renaissance would never have succeeded. Okay, moving my camera because I keep looking at the bottom screen and I feel like I'm not looking at you through the camera. So I'm moving my camera. All right. So let's get back to the Medici. So the Medici are the ones that supported Michelangelo, Raphael. I mean, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have some of the great works of art that we have today from the Renaissance. And the Renaissance, it's not just about painting great art. They learned a different way to paint. They learned perspective. They learned lighting, how to put lighting into art. I mean, they started to express themselves in ways that weren't just artistic, but also scientific in nature, which is absolutely amazing. It was big strides forward for human intelligence. However, the church is still so much in power at this time. I mean, even in Italy, the Catholic Church is not, I don't mean even in Italy, all over Europe. The Catholic Church is running things. So when great works of art are actually produced, they're still having to use religious subjects. If they weren't, they would be called heretics and burned at the stake. I mean, the church had way too much power at this time. And it's not like they were all good and great, like trying to spread greatness. I mean, of course, there's always going to be people that are, devout and good Christians and spreading the good word. But there's always going to be those power-hungry priests that are evil and just trying to do things for their own ambition. It's human inclination. We do these things. But the church, because they are also going to be very, very, very rich, they're also going to contribute to artistic expression. They're the ones that are going to put the money into painting their churches. I mean, nowadays, if you go to Europe, one of the greatest things to do is go look at the old churches, because some of the greatest works of art are in them. So they wanted to create places of worship that were glorious and good, an honor to their god. So they would hire these really famous artists, and they would say, "Will you please do this?" And it would take many years. We're looking at it, actually. You're looking at the Sistine Chapel. That's what the picture is in front of you, which was painted by Michelangelo. Well, the ceiling was painted by Michelangelo. I mean, it takes him years to do this, but it's absolutely breathtaking. And on tomorrow, we're actually going to look at some of the artwork and just the art, not the history. But the way that he is able to capture the complexities of like the human form is amazing. And we'll look at La Pieta is tomorrow as well, which is one of my absolute favorite sculptures that was done by Michelangelo. You can see the folds in the gown of Mary. It looks like it's flowing. It doesn't look like it's stone. It actually looks like it's moving. It's beautiful. So the church are going to be patrons of the arts as well. There's the Medicis who want to gain status and power, and they do it by being patrons of the arts, and the church are going to be patrons of the arts as well. So there is a concerted effort here to increase artistic expression, increase the humanities. The humanities is the study of humans and history and philosophy and sociology. There's definitely going to be an effort to study these things. Now, one of the reasons that the Renaissance, I mean, we talked about how there's a lot of movement and there's a lot of, there's trade going on, changes of ideas, and this is why the Renaissance is able to happen. But the Black Death actually plays a huge part in it as well. So when you lose 1/3 of your population and your society becomes decimated, first, the workers, like the people that are working in the farms, they're going to have more power because they're needed. They don't have to work for no wages anymore. Like if a lord wants a peasant to farm his land, he's going to have to pay him because there's so much need for farmers because 1/3 of them died. So it's actually going to be, this is actually, it's going to take a few hundred years, but because of the Black Death, we're actually going to start to get democratic ideas. I mean, it's going to take a long time to get into fruition, but when you start giving power to the peasants, it's going to change the entire political landscape. And it's going to take a while, but the Black Death definitely played a role in it. So not only are peasants gaining more power, but it makes people look at themselves and say, what is life really about? Like, I could have just died. I mean, 1/3 of the population just died. People are now thinking about, what is life worth? How can I enjoy life? How can I live my life to the fullest? They want to live their best life. And that makes sense. If I survived a pandemic and most of the population died off, I would probably say to myself, I could have died. Maybe I should go to see the pyramids like I've always wanted to see and go to Egypt while I'm still alive. People really wanted to do that. They were living in the now. And they start to become discontented though, because they'll start to question, like, why does the king and why do the wealthy have so much power? Why does the church have so much power? So they're going to really start to look at like change through human intervention, change in political ideas, change in religious ideology. They're going to start to look at the church and say, oh, you're corrupt. There's going to be people like Martin Luther in Germany who say the Catholic Church is a money-making industry now. It's no longer just about the belief in God. It's a revolutionary time for mankind. It's an age of introspection. It's an age of artistic expression. It is a great time to be a student of learning. And it's a really cool time to study. So I hope you guys are excited for it. I know that I love teaching the Renaissance. All right, so that's all we're going to do today. Now, you got a graphic organizer. I mean, that's all I'm going to be presenting today. You guys got a graphic organizer, so you have to make sure that you fill it out. If you need to go back through this video, you can always rewind and fast forward. That's a really good thing about this, and make sure that your graphic organizer is filled out. And then you should have picked up the primary source reading on Lorenzo Medici. You're going to read that and answer the question. So that's your job for today. You're going to make sure your graphic organizer is filled out, and you're going to make sure that the primary source reading on Medici is filled out. Now, I put these things on one page. That way, when you're done, you can just turn it in. Make sure you turn it into the box in your correct period. Remember, I am grading right now for 300 students. So if it gets confused, if you put it in the wrong place, it's really hard on me. I know all your names, which is like, it helps me. Like, I'll know who's in what grade, who's in what class. But help me out, man. I'm really, really overworked at the moment. So do your best to help me. Okay, so tomorrow, that's your job for today, and tomorrow we're going to be looking at Renaissance art. Okay, if you have any questions, send me an email or shoot me a text. I think a lot of y'all have my telephone number. Everybody should have my email, or just stop by the class. I am off 4th and 5th period. I have 4th lunch and 5th period conference, but I'm usually in the classroom just working. So you can always come by if there's questions on the grades or you have questions over the topic, okay? All right, have a good day.